This is not your typical Instagram clone. We're bringing you a modern social app with stunning UI with a native mobile feel, a special tech stack, an infinite scroll feature, and amazing performance. Have you ever struggled with complicated server setups, worrying about security, handling user auth, scaling, managing and storing files securely, and optimizing API performance without losing countless development hours? If that is the case, you're not alone, and I've got something that can help. Whether you're a new or a seasoned developer thinking of starting a fresh side project, doing all these things on your own can be quite a hassle. So, hi there, and welcome to a new project video where you'll build and deploy an amazing social site with a hassle-free backend thanks to Appwrite Cloud. It allows you to create a backend faster than Thanos snaps his fingers and at a much lower cost than scary Firebase for Pro plans. You'll get what you would otherwise have to pay in Firebase for free with Appwrite. But what are we building? The app you'll build contains a robust and stunning authentication system, a homepage for exploring posts shared by others with top creators featured on the right, the ability to like and save posts accessible through a separate dedicated page. And you might think, here we go again, another Instagram clone. But trust me, this is not your typical app. Sure, you've probably mastered the basics of CRUD operations, but have you ever had the chance to implement that one incredible feature that's had us all hooked for decades? Yes, the infinite scroll. We'll implement it inside the Explore page, integrate it together with the search functionality, and I will teach you how to do the same for all other pages too. And moving to other phenomenal features, we'll develop a detailed post page that also displays related posts, a profile page showcasing your liked posts, and the ability to edit your profile. Similarly, browsing other users and their profiles, a create post page for sharing all kinds of memories you would like to share with effortless file management and storage, and a drag and drop feature, an edit post page to edit the contents of your post anytime, and so much more with an amazing responsive UI with the bottom bar that surely gives the feel of a native mobile app. Does it sound exciting as it does to me? We'll develop all of these, all while learning React, React Context API, complex React routing with outlet, and conditional rendering. We'll use the latest version, 5.0, of the backend agnostic data fetching library, famously known as React Query, now Tanstack Query, that will allow us to implement auto caching, refetching, parallel queries, a first-class mutations, loading, state management, and more. Then you'll also learn Tailwind, ShatCN, Appwrite Cloud as a backend as a service tool, and everyone's favorite, TypeScript. There is a lot to learn. So I hope you're pumped to learn these exciting features and master the most wanted skills to impress potential employers and clients. With that said, before we dive into the development of this app, there's one more thing that we must do, and that is set up an account on Appwrite Cloud. So right now, click the special link in the description that's going to allow you to follow along with this video and create a phenomenal backend within Appwrite Cloud. Once you click it, their homepage is going to open, and then you can go to sign up. Once you're in, you can sign in or sign up. The simplest way to do it is using GitHub. Once you're in, you'll have to create your first project. Use JSM to start with, and then add an underscore and add your app name. I'm gonna choose Snapgram, but you can choose anything else. Maybe something with just a bit more imagination, and then click Create Project. And we are in. Appwrite Cloud is going to allow us to create robust, secure, and scalable backend applications. It provides SDKs and server functions that you can integrate with any kind of framework. Some of the best features they offer, and at the same time the features we'll use to create this project, are auth, where you'll be able to add specific team-based and permission-based security. They offer auth options from email and password to magic URLs and more than 30 social sign-ins. The next thing we'll use in our project are gonna be databases. You can add more than one database for a specific project, and the process of creating it is super simple. Then you can of course add many different collections, and the best thing is each collection has its own attributes, which can be of a lot of different types, and you have advanced permissions on a collection level. The next feature I'll also teach you how to use is storage. It allows us to quickly create buckets of different files where you can store any kind of images and even export them and transform them to reduce file sizes. And finally, there are cloud-based serverless functions. And the best thing about Appwrite is that it offers all of these features for free, setting it apart from traditional backend as a service tools in terms of pricing and value. And because of that, it's no surprise that Appwrite has become a trending project on GitHub. So now that you're set up with Appwrite and hopefully excited for what we're about to build together, let's dive right in. To get started with developing our phenomenal Instagram clone application, we can start by creating a new empty folder on our desktop, and let's call it Snapgram. Once you created it, you can simply drag and drop it into your code editor of choice, in this case, Visual Studio Code. Once you're there, you can go to the top, go to View, and then Terminal. This is going to open up a built-in integrated Visual Studio Code terminal. Lately, we've been doing a lot of Next.js, so I'm quite excited to get back to React a bit. We're going to use Vite, which is the fastest way to set up our development environment for React. So head to vitejs.dev and click Get Started. Once you're here, you can scroll down a bit, and you can see that you can initialize your Vite application by running npm create vite add latest. So paste that command right here, add a / to create it in the current Snapgram repository we're in, and press enter. This is going to ask you whether you want to install the create vite package, to which you're going to say Y or yes, and then you can choose which type of application you want to run. In this case, we're going to choose React. We will use TypeScript, so you can press enter, and that's it. You can run npm install to install all the necessary dependencies, and then npm run dev to see it in our browser. The installation usually takes just a couple of seconds, so let's wait for it, and then we'll be able to run the app. Once it is done, press npm run dev. This is going to spin up our application on localhost 5173, and you can see it took less than a second to spin it up. So hold Control and then click right here to open it up. Once you do that, you'll see a simple Vite and React starter. This means that we are ready to get started with creating the base file and folder structure of our application. So let's start from beginning. Here we have our source, inside of which our entire application will be. Here we have assets, which we can move to the public folder, just to clean up what we have in the source. We're going to have a couple of different CSS files, but for now, I want you to delete everything that's inside of the source. As a matter of fact, let's delete the entire source itself, because we're going to recreate it immediately after. So create a new source folder so we can start from scratch. And the main point of contact we need here is a file called main.tsx. This is the starting point of our application, where we can import React from React. And the only file where we're going to import React DOM from React DOM as well. Once you've imported it, you can say React DOM dot create root. This is the root or the starting point of our application. So we have to target our root by saying document.getElement by ID, and we pass a string of root. And then you say .render, and inside of here, we can render a self-closing app component. Of course, this app has to be created and imported from somewhere, so let's create a new app.tsx page. This is going to be our primary router component. So inside of there, run RAFCE. This is a shortcut to create a React arrow function component. If this didn't work for you, you might not have the necessary extension to do so. So head to Extensions and type ES7 Plus React Redux React Native Snippets. Install this package, and then you'll be able to run that command as well. With that said, we can now import this app within the main. So let's simply double-click this app and press Control or Command Space. That's going to open this up, which is going to allow you to just click it and auto import. We're going to use this functionality many times throughout this video, so you'll get used to it. One thing that I noticed is that create root doesn't exist in React DOM, and that's because React DOM has to be imported from react-dom/client. And then here, this is potentially null, so we have to also add an exclamation mark at the end so TypeScript doesn't complain, and no longer are React imports necessary. So with that, we have our main and we have our app. These are the starting points of our application. If you go back and zoom in really closely, you can see our div that says app. Now, I know that this is a pretty simple start, and you might already know how to set all of this up. But let me just remind you that what you're about to build today is extraordinary. It's not something you've built so far. We're going to use the best technologies today to create a complete, comprehensive Instagram clone with liking, saving, top creators functionalities, and much more. So just keep watching, and step by step, we'll get there and you'll know how to create this application from scratch. Now that we have the app, we also have to have some basic styles. For that, we're going to create a new file called globals.css. Keep in mind that all the Tailwind styling that we'll be doing through this video will be done by you directly within components. But we have to have some helper classes here to make our life a bit easier. So in the description down below, you can find a GitHub gist that contains a globals.css file. Copy it and paste it here. You're going to notice that here we have some helper functions for the top bar, for postcard image, and so on, which apply multiple Tailwind CSS classes. So if at any point you want to see what a grid container is, it's simply a set of utility classes to make that grid container possible. So with that said, we can import the globals.css right within the app by saying import /globals.css. But hey, this globals.css file is using Tailwind. So let's go ahead and let's set up Tailwind. And if you haven't heard of Tailwind, Tailwind is a phenomenal utility-first CSS framework packed with utility classes to make our styling simpler. It doesn't impose rules like UI libraries do, but rather it allows you to create custom styles much more quickly. So let's click Get Started, and let's install Tailwind CSS, but we can also search for Vite. This is going to tell us how to install Tailwind with Vite. We first have to run npm install -d Tailwind CSS, post CSS, and auto prefixer. So back in our app, you can go to terminal, and let's go ahead and open up a new terminal window. And within here, simply paste it and press enter. This is going to install the necessary packages for us to be able to style using Tailwind. Once that is done, you can also copy and paste the next command. npx tailwind css init-p. This is going to initialize and create the necessary projects such as the Tailwind config.js. Next, you have to configure your template paths. So simply copy the content from here and go to tailwind.config.js. Once you're there, simply modify this content to what we copied from the documentation. Finally, add Tailwind directives to your CSS. That's going to be within the globals, and we have already done that with our global CSS. Finally, run npm run dev, and then you can style your hello world with a couple of classes to see if it works. So back in our app, we can now modify the app to say, hello, Snapgram. Let's save it. And back in our app, we can see that this is now on H1, but the styles don't seem to be applied. If they were getting applied, we would be able to see the underline. So to make it work, there are a couple of things we need to do. Alongside the globals, we also have to modify the tailwind.config.js to include some additional theming options for our great application. So in the description down below, you'll be able to find a modified tailwind.config.js file, which you can simply copy and then paste right here. It's going to include some font families we can use, widths, screen sizes, but more importantly, colors. So every time we want to specify this dark color, we don't have to say 09090A, we simply say dark 2. And the second thing we have to do to make it work is, if you notice here, we're importing something known as Tailwind CSS animate. So copy that, go to your terminal, and then you have to run npm install -d and then Tailwind CSS animate. This is that extra plugin that's going to allow us to play with just a bit more animations. It quickly got installed. You can go back to your application, press Ctrl+C to stop it from running, and finally rerun the application by running npm run dev. And quickly, our application is up and running on localhost 5173, and we can see that this H1 is indeed underlined, which means that the Tailwind styles are getting properly installed. And we can also see the dark background, which means that our base styles are getting properly applied. And in a nutshell, that means that Tailwind has been properly set up. So what should we do next? Well, let's set up the base routing of our application by creating a couple of routes and therefore a couple of pages. And in React, to do the routing, you have to install an additional package by running npm install react router DOM, the only package you need to manage the routes. Once it is installed, we can head to the main.tsx file. Here, you can import something known as a browser router coming from react-router-dom. And then we can wrap our application in a browser router, just like so. There we go. The app is going to go within it. This means that now the browser router is going to control the routing for our entire application, which makes our app.tsx that much more powerful. Because now within here, we can import routes as well as a route from React Router DOM. Once you do that, you can wrap everything in a main section. We'll be using HTML5 semantic tags all across the video. You can also give it a class name equal to flex and h-screen, meaning it's going to take 100% of the screen. Now you can see how I quickly hovered over it and I can see exactly what CSS properties have been applied. This is a pretty cool extension for Tailwind. So if you don't have it already, just type Tailwind CSS IntelliSense, the first extension that pops up. Install it, and if you're not a fan of Tailwind, you can still follow along, but you'll know exactly which properties are getting applied. For the ones that don't get this hover, you can simply search them here, and then you'll be able to find them within globals.css. With that said, we can wrap everything in a routes parent. Within the routes, we'll be able to define two types of routes: public routes and also private routes. Public routes are the routes that everybody will be able to see, the sign up and the sign in. And private routes are the routes that you'll be able to see only if you're signed in. So let's create our two first routes. Let's do a route, which is going to be a self-closing component that's going to have a path of /sign in, and it's going to render an element of sign in form. It's going to be a self-closing element. Now, of course, this is a page or a component which we have to import inside of here. And we can also repeat this with our first private route. So we can say route, self-close it, give it an index. This means that this is the starting page, and then the element is going to be a home component. So we can put a self-closing home component right here. Now, of course, we have to import these components from somewhere. So let's create the structure needed to do so. In the source folder, we're going to create two new folders. One is going to be called _auth, and the other is going to be called _root. These are two folders that are going to make it simpler for us to know what is public and what is not. Within auth, we're going to create a new folder called forms, and within forms, we're going to have our sign in form.tsx, where we can run RAFCE. This is going to create a simple sign-in form component. Within forms, we can also create another one, which is going to be sign up form.tsx, where we can also run RAFCE. And outside of forms, but inside of _auth, we want to create a layout, auth layout.tsx. And there we can run RAFCE as well. This layout is going to wrap both of our sign in and sign up forms. It's going to have things like the logo as well as this wonderful image gallery that appears on the right side. And then the forms will change depending on the URL. How cool is that? That's why we have this generic layout, but then components are going to be the ones that change the form. And we're going to have a similar thing for our root. Within the root, we're going to have a folder called pages. Within pages, we're of course going to have our home.tsx, where we can run RAFCE. But outside of pages, we're going to have our _root that's going to contain a root layout.tsx, where we can also run RAFCE. And of course, the layout for the home pages is going to contain things like this sidebar on the left, sidebar on the right, and more. Now, within root pages, we're going to have many different pages. I mean, tens of pages by when we're done with this application. So we don't want to simply import each one in a new line. So we can create a new index.ts file, which is going to allow us to import them in a cleaner way. But first we have to export each component we have. So we can say export default as home from /home. And now we can close all of these new open files, go back to the app. We can automatically import sign-in form from /auth forms sign-in form and import home from root pages. While we're here, we can duplicate our sign-in route and simply exchange it for sign up. And here we can say sign up form, which we can also import from auth forms. Now notice how for the auth forms, it imported them as default imports, whereas for the home, it imported it as the named import, which is going to allow us to later on import page 1, page 2, and all the other pages within a single line to keep our code more tidy. Great. So now we have the base structure, and you know how the routing is going to work. But there's one missing piece. We haven't utilized our layouts, and the React Router DOM allows us to do so easily. You can create a new route, just like the routes you created before, but this time it's not going to be self-closing. It's going to accept an element, which is going to be the auth layout we created, which you can automatically import from auth layout. And then within it, we can place additional elements or pages that are going to appear there. How clever is that? It allows you to use the layout, but then immediately place the pages using that layout within. So we can repeat the same procedure with our private routes as well, where we're going to have a route, and there we're going to have an element of root layout. Of course, it has to be defined as a self-closing component, and then we can place all of the home routes right here. Great. So now you can see we have a lot of imports already, but we have done a great job in setting up our path for success. So now going back to localhost 5173, the only thing we can see is the root layout, but soon enough, you'll be able to see much more than that. So how would you feel if I told you we're going to start with this completely custom and stunning sign up and sign in screen? After all, for our social media app to work, we first have to onboard our users that are later on going to upload their posts. Most likely it's going to be cat photos as it usually is on the internet, but that's up to them. It's up to us to allow them to do so on a beautifully designed and fast platform. So let's jump into the sign up form, the first thing that our user will see. Our sign up form will be just that, a form. And in this application, we'll be using shadcn styling library. It is a library of beautifully designed components that you can customize using Tailwind. Everything from dashboards, cards, tasks, playgrounds, and, of course, forms. You'll be able to create wonderful, but also simple and minimalistic forms. Everything you need is there. So to get started with shadcn, we can head to their documentation and then installation. In this case, we're using Vite. We already set up the project and we already initialized Tailwind. Next, we have to modify our tsconfig.json by adding this thing in paths. So we can open up our file explorer and then go to tsconfig.json. So press copy right here. Go to your file explorer and then go to tsconfig.json. Right here, below linting, we're going to add a shadcn note, and we can paste the base URL as well as paths, but don't forget to add a comma right here. Next, you have to install types node so that the vite config can resolve paths without errors. For that, we can open up the terminal, paste it, and press enter. Once installed, we can also copy our paths. And then go to vite.config.ts, where you can simply override everything you have in there with what we just copied. After doing that, you have to run the shadcn UI init command to set up our project. So back in the terminal, we can run npx shadcn UI add latest init. Let's press Y to install it, and then we'll have to answer a couple of questions. We would like to use TypeScript, yes. We would like a default style, yes. We're going to use the slate color. Our global CSS file is within source/globals.css, so we have to modify that. We do want to use CSS variables. Our Tailwind config.js file is located right here, so we can simply press enter, and we can press enter for the import alias as well, for utils too, and we do want to use React Server components, and we can write a configuration. So simply yes, 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 enter, 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 and then Y to submit it. This is going to install the necessary dependencies, and then we'll be able to start using shadcn components. That's it. This was the last step right here. Now, a big difference between shadcn and other UI libraries is that shadcn with this config didn't add absolutely any code to our project. It will only add the code and the components that we actually need. So we'll have to manually add every single component we want to use. So let's use their button example to start with. Copy this command, paste it in the terminal, and press enter. It's going to say installing button. And if you pay close attention, you'll be able to notice that it's going to create a complete new folder called components, UI, and there's going to be the code for the button. That's why shadcn is so cool. It doesn't add any code you don't need. It simply adds a button component that we just installed, and you can modify its source code. It's not like we'll need to do that, but you can if you want to. So with that said, now we have everything set up, and let's try to use that button within our sign-up form. The only thing you need to do that is import button from components UI button, and then use it. So back in our app, let's do just that. Import button. We're going to copy this button and just use it right here within this div. Let's press save, and back in our application, if you go to /sign-up, which is the route for our sign up page, you can see the auth layout. That's correct. And the reason for that is that our auth layout, it's not returning any pages that are within it. So to be able to see this button, let's first focus on implementing the auth layout. The only thing we'll need in here are two special components from React Router DOM. So let's import a component called outlet. Interesting name. I'm going to soon let you know what it does, and then navigate. And we can import that from React Router DOM. Now, later on, we'll have to figure out if a user is authenticated. So for now, we can simply say is authenticated is equal to, let's do false for now. Later on, this is going to be a dynamic value. Based off of this Boolean variable, we can return a React fragment, but then we can open a new dynamic block of code and say if is authenticated. In that case, if we are authenticated, we can return a navigate to /. So we want to navigate the user to the home. But if we're not authenticated, in that case, we can return a React fragment like this. That's going to have a section within it. And that section is going to render the outlet, meaning what has to be on the page we're on, such as sign up or sign in, whatever is within these pages right here. Great. So now let's save this, go back to our app, and you can see a wonderful click me button. Great. Now let's go back to the normal size. And let's actually start implementing what we can see here on the finished website. A complete sign up and sign in pages with the design and the forms. To do that, we can first style the layout a bit by giving this section a class name equal to flex-1, justify-center. So we need to ensure that the form is centered horizontally, as well as items-center, which is going to center it vertically. It's going to be one below another, so flex-col, and padding Y of 10, meaning padding on top and bottom. This is going to now center it. But on the right side of the screen, we want to show this beautiful image. So to do that, we can render a self-closing image tag that's going to have a source of. And now, how are we going to get access to this image? I created a few wonderful assets that I want you to be able to use. So down in the description, in that same GitHub gist folder where the code is, you'll be able to find a link to a zipped public folder. Download it, unzip it, delete the existing public folder, and then simply paste the new one right here. Not within the source like I did, it happens. You have to put it right here outside of everything, so it appears on top of the source folder. And once you have it there, you'll be able to see the assets that contain icons and images, which means that we can define our path right here. It's going to be /assets, /images, /side-img.svg. The alt is going to be logo, and class name is going to be hidden. So usually on mobile devices, it will be hidden, but on extra large devices, it will be showing, so it's a block. We wanted to take the full height of the screen, so h-screen. The width is going to be 1/2, so 1/2. It's going to be object cover and BG no repeat. Great. So now that we have modified our auth layout, we can close it. And if we go back to our website, it's going to look like this. Pretty cool, right? We have the right side, which is the image, and then we have the button on the left side, which right now doesn't do absolutely anything, but soon enough it will. That's because we'll create a comprehensive sign up and sign in form, and we'll do that using ShadCN most comprehensive and most complex component, and that is the form. So go here and search for the form. It is the most comprehensive one because forms are tricky. They're one of the most common things you'll build in web applications, but also one of the most complex. So that's why ShadCN automatically out of the box uses React Hook Form, which is a great library for managing forms and states, and then Zod, which is great for form validation. Here we can learn a bit more about the anatomy of a form. So you have a form component, and then you have form fields within it. Each form field has a control, a name, and then you can choose how it's going to look like. It's going to render an item, a label, form control, description, and a message. And here we have a complete form example. So let's go ahead and follow the steps to create our form. First, we need to copy the command to install it. So we can go back, go to our second terminal, and paste the command to add the form. Soon enough, it will be done, and then we can actually use it. So first, we have to define the shape of our form by using a Zod schema. Of course, you can learn more about Zod in the official Zod documentation, but don't worry, it's a pretty simple library to use, and I'm gonna teach you how to use it. So let's copy, import everything as Z from Zod, and then const form schema. We can paste that right here at the top. We can put this import on top as it is external import, and we're gonna put this right here because it is coming right here from our code. And this form schema is going to go right here within our component. The next thing they say we have to do is define a form by using the useFormHook coming from the React Hook Form library. So let's go ahead and import Zod resolver, as well as Z from Zod, as well as the form schema, which in this case can be placed above the component, but then we'll also need to import the form and everything else that is in here. So instead of copying everything, let's copy just the things that we need. First, I'm going to copy the Zod resolver, paste it right here at the top, and then I'm going to copy the entire form right here. or rather just the definition of a form. And we can paste it right here on top. And the form schema can go outside right here. So now we're defining our form. We're also using the form, and this has to be imported from React hook form, the use form right here. But now that we have defined it, we can actually build out our form. So we need to import all of the different components that go into building a form, which we can paste right here on top. And you can notice that one of these is an input, which is another component we have to install. Because if you check the components so far, you can notice the form, label, and button, but no input. So to install the input, you know what we need to do. Just say npx chat UI latest, add input. It is as simple as that. We can also put all of these components in one line, so it's easier to see everything, just like so. And then we can actually build out our form by copying the form right here. And let's paste it instead of this button. We can indent it properly and save it. And that's it. You now have a fully accessible form that is type safe with client-side validation. And let's see if it actually looks like this. And would you look at that? It looks amazing, but it's only one input and one button. But the validation is working wonderfully, and ChatCN has this beautiful but minimalistic UI. So now let's convert this into this and make it fully functional. To do that, we won't simply keep everything in a single file, as that would quickly clutter our view and wouldn't be so reusable. So we're going to use many reusable practices to turn this into a component that we can then reuse and manage its data more efficiently. And the first step we'll do to achieve that is we're going to extract this form schema into a separate validations file. So let's go ahead and go to File Explorer, collapse everything, and go within Source, within Lib, and then right here, create a new folder called Validation. Within it, we can create a new index.ts file. And within index, we can do something similar to what we have done in the signup form. We can import everything as z from Zod, and then we can create or define a form schema. So right here, let's define it. But in this file, we're going to keep many different form schemas, so we have to define which one is it. This is going to be a signup validation schema. And we're not going to define it in this file and then not use it. We have to say export const signup validation to be able to use it. So now we can go back to our signup form and we can import form schema, or rather we can rename it to signup validation coming from /lib/validation. And we can use it in 3 places where we used it before. And in this case, we also need a z from Zod as we are referencing it right here as a type. Great, so now we have just extracted one thing. But instead of simply extracting that base example we had, let's actually make it a bit more meaningful. We're not just going to have a username, we're going to have a name as well. So let's define it. At the top, let's say name is going to be a z.string with a minimum of 2 characters. And then as the second parameter of a specific option, you can provide the error message. So in this case, we can say a message is something like too short. There we go. And then you can continue doing that. We have the username. Username is going to also be a minimum of 2 characters. We don't need a maximum here. And we can also provide a message of something like too short. Then we can have an email, which is going to be a z.string .email, like so. And then we can have a password, which is going to be z.string, and it's going to be a min of 8 characters. And we're going to say too short if it's less than 8. Of course, feel free to provide more meaningful error messages, something like password must be at least 8 characters. You can do that for all the other ones. Now we have our proper signup validation. But as you can notice, we're using it here. But as for the default values, we're simply defining the username. So let's also add a name at the start equal to an empty string. Let's also do a username. After that, we're going to have an email. And finally, we're going to have a password. So now we're starting to create the structure for what our form is yet to become. And of course, the next thing we have to do is actually create our form with all of the necessary form fields. So if we go back to the finished site, right now we still have just the input. But let's go ahead and put this side by side with our editor so we can see the changes that we make live. Now we have our form on the right side and the code on the left. So let's go ahead and turn this into an actual final form to look exactly like this one does. To be able to do that, we can start with the outer div, or rather with the form. We don't need to wrap the form with anything, as the form is going to be the most outer side container. So we can remove this outer div, and we can select everything within the form, just like so, and indent it properly. I always try to keep my code clean. Now, within this form, we're going to have a div. So right here, create a new div. And this div is going to have a class name equal to, on small devices, width is going to be 420. It's going to be flex center, and it's going to be flex col, so the elements appear one below another. Next, we have to create this logo on the top. So let's immediately do that. Here, we can render a self-closing image that's going to have a source of /assets/images/logo.svg. And you can give it an alt tag of logo. Now, if you save it, you should be able to see a nice looking logo appear right on top as soon as you reload. And there we go. You can see logo's icon. Actually, the entire logo is there, as you can see when I drag and drop it here, but you cannot see it as the background is white. So let's go ahead and figure out why our background is not dark as it was dark before. If you head to your globals.css file, you'll notice it got overridden by shadcn, and it's no longer applying the black background on our body. So once again, to get back to our previous globals, you'll have to go to the GitHub gist down below, copy it, and then paste it right over here. Once you do that, you're gonna get an error because our tailwind.config.js also got overridden. So copy it from the GitHub gist and then paste it right here. That's going to ensure that you have access to all of the necessary theme colors and everything is going to work as it should now with the dark mode. So below this image, let's create an h2 that's going to say something like create a new account. And we can give it a class name of h3 bold. Now I know what you're thinking, why h3 if the element is h2? Well, that's because on medium devices, it's going to be h2 bold. So we're going to make it a bit smaller there. We can also give it a padding top of 5, so PT of 5, and on small devices, a larger PT of 12 to create some spacing. Below the h2, we can have a p tag, and this p tag is going to say to use snapgram. Enter your account details. And now we can give it a class name that's going to say text-light-3, small-medium for the font size, on medium devices, base-regular, and a margin top of 12. And we don't necessarily have to say account, just details, to use a bit less width. Now, we want to wrap our entire form within this div. So let's copy the ending tag and paste it right here below the end of the form. And let's expand our form to fit nicely right here. There we go. Now our form is going to have a class name of flex, flex-col, gap of 5, w-full, and then margin top of 4. This is going to make the elements extend the full width of the screen, or rather full width of the container, so now everything looks uniform. The first field we have is going to be a name field. We can change the form label to name, and we can remove the placeholder, but rather we can give it a type is equal to text and a class name equal to shad input. If we save this, it's going to get this beautiful view, and we don't need a form description. I believe a title, or rather a label, is enough. So now we're getting closer to this final view. So let's go ahead and duplicate this form field right here below. And the second one is going to say username, and we can change it to username here as well. That's great. 2 done, 2 more to go. Let's duplicate it 2 more times. The next one is going to say email, and we can say email here, as well as change the type of the field to email. There we go. And the last one is going to, of course, be the password. So let's change this to password. Type password as well, and say password here. So now once we type here, it's actually going to be dots, meaning it's hidden. And finally, we need a beautiful button that's going to allow us to submit the form. So let's give this button type submit a class name equal to shad-button_primary. There we go. But it's not always going to say submit. Sometimes it has to load, meaning we've submitted it and it's doing its action. So what we can do is create, for now, a fake field called isLoading. So const isLoading is at the start going to be set to true. And now if we go back, we can use that property to make some dynamic changes. If isLoading, in that case, we can return a div that's going to have a class name equal to flex center and a gap of 2. Between the center and the flex, you need to have a dash. And here, we can say loading ... Else, we're going to render something else, which is simply a text that's going to say sign up. And there we go. Now we can see loading. But to make this loading a bit more interesting, let's create a new component called loader. So we can go to our components and create a new folder within there called shared. These are components that are shared all across our application. Within it, we can create a new loader.tsx and run RAFCE. Within here, we can wrap everything in a div. That div is going to have a class name equal to flex center and w-full. And within it, we can render just one self-closing image with a source equal to /assets /icons /loader.svg. We can have an alt tag of loader. We can have a width of about 24 and a height of 24. Now, if we go back to our sign up form, we can call our self-closing loader right here by putting it here and then double clicking and pressing Control or Command space to import it from components. If you save it, you can see this loader appear right here, which is amazing. Now, of course, we're not submitting yet. So what we can do is bring this isLoading to false because we haven't yet submitted. We have nothing to load. And now we have our beautiful form that you can see right here. It is a bit wider, and that's because we here have more words. To use Snapgram, please enter your details. Let's see, what do we have here? To use Snapgram, okay, let's be nice and say, please enter your details, which is going to make our form a bit wider. Great. And now that we have all of those fields, we have to figure out how to actually submit them. But before that, we're missing just one additional piece of information, which is the link to go to the login as well, in case we already have an account. So right here below this button, we can create a p tag that's going to have a class name equal to text-small-regular, text-light-2, and text-center and margin top of 2. So that's going to provide this nice centered text. We can say already have an account. And if that is the case, we can render a link component. This link has to be imported from, we don't have it here, but it should be coming from React Router DOM. So right here at the top, we can say import link from React Router DOM. And now if we go down, this is looking good. And what is this link going to say? Well, it's going to point to /sign in. It's going to have a class name of text-primary, and it's going to say log in. There we go. Let's style it a bit further by giving it a text-primary 500, which is the shade of the color, text-small-semi-bold, and finally a margin left of 1. So now it's looking great, and it's going to redirect us to the sign-in form, which doesn't exist yet. We're going to create it as soon as we implement the functionality to actually log our users in. That's definitely the first thing we have to do, right? So how is that going to work? Well, everything starts with a button that has a type of submit. And once we submit it, it's going to submit the entire form right here. That form is going to call the handle submit function, which we have here. And then the only question is, what do we want to do on submit? And the simple answer is, we want to create the user. And that usually looks something like this. We say const new user is equal to await. Why await? Because usually creating a user takes some time. It is an asynchronous action in the database, which means we have to specify this as an async function. And then usually the function to create a user is called create user account, to which we want to pass the values. But as you can see, we don't yet have the create user account function. So let's comment this out. And we have no idea where is this even coming from. How are we going to create our user? And thankfully for us, this is where Appwrite comes in. They're going to help us with databases, functions, storage, but in this case, auth, as we actually have to create our users. And as I've told you at the start, we'll be using Appwrite's cloud platform. Click the special Appwrite Cloud link in the description that's going to allow you to sign in and follow along with this video seamlessly. And then sign in or sign up, I recommend with GitHub. And once you're in, you'll be able to create your first project. Let's do something like JSM_Snapgram. Of course, this is now going to be taken by me, but whatever name you decide to take, definitely append JSM in front of it. And then click Create. There we go. Our JSM Snapgram has been created, and here we have our Getting Started guide. But thankfully, you won't have to follow it because you're watching this video and I'm gonna teach you everything step by step to utilize all of the primary Appwrite Cloud features. We'll be dealing with auth really soon to create our users, databases, functions, and even storage. So for now, the only thing you have to do is copy this ID that you've been given for your project. Once you do that, we can go back to our application, and then we can go to our Explorer, collapse everything so it's easier to see. As a matter of fact, we can close all the files at the moment, and then go to Source, Lib, and within the lib, we're going to create a new folder called Appwrite. Within Appwrite, we're going to create a new file called config.ts. Inside of here, you'll be able to import all of Appwrite's functionalities, such as client, account, databases, storage, and avatars coming from Appwrite. Once you have it, we of course have to install Appwrite as a dependency. So open up your terminal and run npm install Appwrite. And that's the only dependency you have to install to make this work. And just to verify, in my case, I'm on version 13.0.0. By the time you're watching this video, maybe a couple more new versions arrive, but at this time, I'm happy with this one. So now we'll be able to initialize all of these Appwrite's functionalities. And doing so is pretty easy. We'll have to export const Appwrite config, which is going to be equal to just a simple object. Here, you'll be able to define a couple of things. First of all, your project ID. And I think you already know it, right? It's the ID we copied from Appwrite, but we never want to share any IDs or keys or secrets publicly. So for that, we're going to use environment variables. So let's go to our app, and then outside of the source, we can create a new .env.local file. And within it, we can define the vite_appwrite_project_ID is equal to this same ID that we copied. That way, instead of just simply using plain text here, we'll be able to say import .meta.env.vite_appwrite_project_ID. And that way, it's going to be safe. Now here, you can notice that our TypeScript is complaining a bit, saying that env does not exist on type import meta. And we just have to let TypeScript know that we're using Vite and that this is actually going to exist. And the way you do that is in the source, you can add a new vite-env.d.ts file. And there you can type reference types is equal to vite/client and then close it like so and add 3 dashes at the front. Once you do that, you can see that it's no longer complaining. But now we can still see some warnings that these variables are not utilized. So how do we utilize all of these great Appwrite functionalities? Well, we can say export const client, for example, is equal to new client. So we just have to create an instance of this client. And we're going to repeat this procedure for everything else. So here we can say account is going to be equal to account. Then we have something like databases is equal to new databases. Then we have storage is equal to new storage. And we also have avatars is equal to new avatars. You can see that it's complaining for a lot of these, saying that the argument client was not provided. So for all of these to work, we have to pass in the client within them right here so they know what they're referring to. And with that said, we no longer have any warnings. But now we have to configure our client, and we can do that by saying client dot set project. It's pretty simple, right? It's Appwrite config dot project ID. We already have that. But there's another thing we have to do, and that is set up the endpoint. So we can say client dot set endpoint, and that's going to be Appwrite config dot URL. But hey, how do we get this URL? It's obvious it has to go here, right? And we can import it from envs by saying import.meta.env.vite_appwrite_URL. So now we have to go to our .env.local and we have to add the vite_appwrite_URL is equal to a string. But hey, where do we get this Appwrite URL? We didn't see it here. In the quick start docs, it's going to say right here that we can set up endpoint as the https cloud.appwrite.io v1. So let's copy this and paste it right here. So one more time, that's https://cloud.appwrite.io/v1. And now we are properly configuring our client. And this is all that we need to get started with authentication. So now, alongside config within Appwrite, we're going to create a new file called api.ts. And within it, we can export async function, create user account. That's going to get in the user, that's going to accept the user as a parameter, and then it'll try to do something. Do you get where we're going with this? This is the function we're about to call from within our form. So now we can connect to Appwrite's authentication functionalities to actually create this user. So to do that, let's first follow the proper TypeScript rules by defining the interface for this user. And we can do that by saying that the user is of a type, or rather of the interface, I as an interface, new user. And we can define that within a new folder that's in the source folder called types. Within types, we can have a new index.ts. And in the GitHub gist down below, you'll be able to find this entire file that's going to contain a couple of different interfaces. We can go through each one of these as we're referencing it in the code, such as in this case, export type iNewUser, which has a name, email, username, and password. And now we can just import it right here from add/types. And now we know exactly what this user is all about. Once we know that, we can open up a new try and catch block. In the error, we can simply console log the error, and we might as well return it. So return error. But the better question is, what are we going to do within the try block? And here we have to create a new account by saying const new account is equal to await account.create. And we need to pass a couple of attributes. The first one is the ID. Of course, we can just randomly type it, but Appwrite provides us with a great utility function called ID. So we can simply import ID from Appwrite. And then what you can do is just call it and say id.unique, and that's it. It's always going to provide you with a unique ID. And then we provide the user.email, user.password, and user.name. And for now, we can return the new account. So now you can also notice this account we're calling is not defined. So let's double click it. And would you look at that? We are already exporting it from the config. And if you go into the config, remember that this is the account utility that we have established before by passing the client into it and referencing the account from Appwrite. That's going to allow us to deal with the auth functionalities of Appwrite Cloud. So now we can close all of this and go back to our form. Within auth, forms, sign up form, and here we're back to calling the function that's going to create a new user. So let's go ahead and uncomment it, double click and then press Ctrl space and import it from lib Appwrite API. And we're now hoping that we're gonna get a new user right here, or at least a new account, back after the creation is done. So let's go ahead and console log that user right here by saying console log new user. Now, if we save this, we are ready to submit our form by entering a name. Let's do Adrian. We can do JavaScript mastery and an email of contact@jsmastery.pro, and finally a password. So let's go ahead and click sign up. And we have really good validation here. I'm glad we were able to see it. We need 8 characters, so I'm gonna enter them and then click sign up. Now it seems like nothing has happened, but let's go ahead and go to inspect. And then right here, we can check the console. We indeed did get back an object that says created ad, updated ad, email, name, password update, and all this good stuff, which means that this is coming back from Appwrite, which then means that our user was indeed created. It's that we just didn't do anything with it, which is gonna be our next goal. So now if we go back to our Appwrite project and reload the page, you should be able to see that a new user has been created. And you can even dive into it, see more information about it, verify it, check the membership, or do a lot more stuff, which is pretty amazing that we're able to set up authentication this early in the project. But it's not going to be enough just to create our users. We'll also have to set up our databases and our storage buckets for all of this to work, because our users will create posts and we need to be able to create relations between users, posts, and more. First, we're going to create a new bucket for our media. This is where we're going to upload our images. So let's create a new bucket and call it media. There we go. As simple as it gets. Immediately, we're given the media ID. So let's go ahead and copy it. And back within our app, we can go to our .env file. And then we can paste it right here. But before, say vite underscore appwrite underscore storage underscore ID, and then set this equal to this string that we got from here. This is our storage bucket. Now, while we're here, let's go ahead and set up our databases as well. So click create database and enter the new database name called Snapgram. You don't have to enter the database ID because it will be generated automatically. So just click create. Now that we have our database, we can go ahead and copy its ID. So go back and this time say vite underscore appwrite underscore database underscore ID, and we can paste it right here. So now we have the Appwrite URL and then 3 different IDs from 3 different services that Appwrite Cloud offers. Now, while we're here, we also need to define how our database is going to look like. So the entire database structure. So bear with me. Let's define all of the collections and relations between them that we're going to have in our app. It's going to take some time to define them, but after that, we'll be good to go for the entirety of this phenomenal build. So let's just click create collection. Let's enter our first collection name, which is going to be posts, and click create. Then you need to go to settings. You need to head down to permissions And you can allow access from anywhere by clicking any. Then check all the text and click update. So it's pretty cool how we have a robust permissions/role system built into Appwrite Cloud. Next, we can repeat the same process for our users collection. So let's create a new collection called users. Click create, go to settings. Same thing here, we need to add permissions. Click any, and then tick all the boxes and click update. And now there's going to be a third one, which is going to be called saves. And this is going to be for all the saved posts. Within here, we can also go to settings, go to permissions, add any, and then select all the boxes and click update. And now we have to start creating relations. So let's go to the posts collection. And again, make sure to follow exactly what I do here, because our app is not going to work if we don't properly set up our relations. It's important that we create relations immediately so everything works later on. So go to attributes and then click create attribute. In this case, we're immediately diving to a complex attribute of a type relationship. In this case, we want to create a two-way relationship, and this is going to be a relationship between a post and a user. So we can say users, attribute key is going to be creator. And then the attribute key in the related collection is going to be posts. And a relation is going to be many to one. So this is how it's going to look like. One creator can have multiple posts. And while we're here, it wouldn't be such a bad idea to start sketching things out, right? In our Ultimate Next.js 13 course, we were doing a lot of sketching because we covered a tough project where we have to deeply explain all of the concepts covered. And this often includes a lot of sketching. So in this video, I want to also do the same. I want to give you a bit of behind the scenes of the level of complexity we go in our pro courses. So if you haven't checked them out yet, that's great. This video is about React, but after you watch this free video on YouTube, you might want to learn Next.js, server actions, and all of the great stuff that it offers. So add yourself a to-do. After you're done with this video, check out JS Mastery Pro. But with that said, let's start sketching the complex architecture of our Snapgram application. We obviously have posts, saves, and users. So let's go ahead and create all of that as simple rectangles. Here, we're going to have our users. We're also going to have our posts. And finally, we're going to have our saves, which are 3 different collections. Now, it's obvious that we're creating a many-to-one relationship between our user, called a creator, and our posts. So this means that one user can have multiple posts. So let's just create this relationship. That's from both sides. And we can do something like this, where we're going to simply duplicate this right here, indicating that one user can have or can create 2 different posts. So that's going to work like this. And then an important thing here is on deleting a document, we must set null, as this is going to set the document ID as null in all related documents, meaning it doesn't exist. So let's click create. And it's possible that something like this happens, but don't worry, just go to databases, select your database, and then you can see your collections here. Specifically, we're working with users and then attributes. And you can see here that now we have a relationship with posts. And also that same attribute should be within posts as well, because that's the relationship. So now let's create a second attribute under posts, which is also going to be a relationship attribute. It's going to be a two-way relationship related to users one more time, but this time not who created it, rather who liked it. So we're going to say likes. So it's going to be likes. Here we're going to say liked, so who liked it. And then a relation is going to be many to many, because many users can like many different posts. And then on deletion, we also want to set the same, set null, and click create. There we go. And now we can slowly start thinking about which attributes our posts are going to have. So right here, we can make this a bit smaller and make it a bit simpler to read. let's do something like an attribute, which is going to be creator. We know that each post in this case has to have a creator, and we know that a user is going to have a posts attribute. So let's do something like this, attributes. This is going to help us when creating a database, or rather not, because this is going to help us understand our database structure. Usually, you would have to create all of this within your application, but now Appwrite actually creates the relationships for us, which is super handy. And the second attribute we have added is going to be likes. So the post is going to have likes, and then users are going to have liked. So which posts have they liked? Let's move forward. Let's create a next attribute for our post, and that's going to be a string this time. The attribute key is going to be a caption. The size is going to be 2200. This was a default size for an Instagram post, so that's where we took it, 2200 characters. Default is not going to be anything, and you can click create. We're going to also need tags attribute. So let's go ahead and create a new one of a type string that's going to be called tags. It's going to be 2200 as well, and it's going to be an array of tags. Pretty interesting. Then we're going to need an image URL. So let's create a new URL type. Yeah, there's a special type for the URL, which is going to be called image URL. And then it's going to be required, and click create. We're going to also need an image ID attribute, which is going to be of a type string. This is needed if somebody wants to delete a post. So we can say image ID of a size 2200. Again, feel free to choose whatever you want here, and it's going to be required. We need a location attribute as well of a type string. So let's say location. Size is going to be 2200. And this is more or less it. These are all the attributes that we need for our post. So what we can do is, instead of just typing them out, we can go ahead and screenshot what we have here. On Windows, I usually use Command-Shift-S, and then you can simply select it like this. There's a similar shortcut on macOS as well. So let's take it and let's put it right here within our FigJam. So it's really easy to understand what properties each one of our posts has. There we go. Now we even know the type. This is going to be helpful later on once we dive into the further architecture of our application. Now that we have all the attributes, we can go to the indexes tab of our posts. And this is where Appwrite allows you to do automatic searching of your collections. So click create index. You can call it caption. The index type is going to be full text. The attribute is going to be caption, and the order is going to be descending. This is phenomenal. Essentially, you have built-in search and filtering. This is going to allow us to automatically search for different posts based off of caption. So let's click create. Now we want to go to the users collection and also start creating new attributes. So go to attributes. You can see that we already have liked and posts. Let's create a new one of a type string that's going to be name. We can enter the same size as before and click create. We're going to also need a username for our user. So let's say attribute is going to be username. It's going to be 2200, and we can click create. We also need an account ID. So let's create a new string of account ID of 2200. Let's make it required, and let's click create. Our user is also going to have an email. So let's select an email type, call it an email, make it required, and click create. Our user can also add a bit of info about themselves. So let's create a new string property called bio, and here they can add their biography. Let's click create. Finally, we need to create an image ID attribute of a type string. So that's going to be image ID of the same size. And this is needed for deleting the profile images when changing the profile image. Let's click create. We also need the image URL attribute. This is going to be of a type URL. So let's say image URL required and create. And this is it. we immediately have all of the attributes that belong to our user. What we can do is also screenshot it and add it to our FigJam. There we go. I'm just going to make it the same size. And we can put it right here below users collection. There we go. It's pretty handy to know the full structure, especially as the app grows. And finally, the saves collection is remaining. So let's go back to our Appwrite, go to saves, attributes, and we need to create a user attribute, which is going to be of a type relationship. So it's going to be a two-way relationship between users, where it's going to say user, and it's going to say save. So we need to know which user saved which post. It's going to be a many-to-one relationship because one user can save many posts. And on delete, we have to select set null. And let's click create. And also we need to create a post attribute so we know which post was saved. So we can create a new relationship, and we can create a two-way relationship between posts. We can call it post and save. Make sure you call these attributes exactly the same as I'm calling them here. That's necessary for the application to work. And then we can do a many-to-one and set null and click create. So now we can copy these one more time and we can add them right here below the saves. And there we go. So now we can see that saves actually kind of comes in between of some of the posts. So here we can make this a bit smaller, and we can define that a user can save a specific post. So it's going to go something like this, saves, and then we can go to a specific post. Users can create posts, but users can also save the posts that they like. Pretty cool, right? And then these are the attribute of the save. So this is our current structure. We'll be returning back to this FigJam, and whenever we need to explain something in more detail, that's exactly what I'm going to do in a visual manner. If you'd like me to add more visuals to our videos, just let me know. For now, I've been only doing this in our pro courses because we have so much more time to cover things in depth. In videos, the time is limited, but still, I'll try to make them as detailed as possible. Finally, now that we've created our collections, our database is ready. This took some time, but I mean, it's pretty crazy. Really soon, we now have a complete authentication system where we can add users. Not only that, but now we can add them to our database as well. In the database, we have our collections with complete attributes, so we know the structure of each one of our elements, which we can see right here. And then we also have relationships between them, and we also have storage, so we can upload images to our application. I mean, Appwrite Cloud really does everything you want it to do in this case. Now, the last thing we need to do is go to database and then copy the IDs right here of these collections. So let's copy the saves, go back here, and we can say something like vt_appwrite_ saves _collection_ID. It's a long name, I know, but it's better to be safe than sorry. And finally, we can duplicate this 2 more times. We're going to save saves collection ID, we're going to have post collection ID, and we're going to have a user collection ID as well. So for the post, we can copy it right here. Don't mistakenly do the wrong one. And finally, we can do the users. There we go. So now we have the Appwrite URL, the project ID, the database ID, storage ID, user collection ID, post collection ID, and the saves ID. In case you didn't copy the project ID before, it's right here within the overview. Database is right here. Storage is right here. Everything is so easy to find. Now we can make use of these variables by going back not to our sign up form, but rather to our config right here. We're initializing all of these services here, but we're not yet properly setting them up. And we can do that by having the URL, the project ID, We also need a database ID, which is going to be import.meta.env.vite_appwrite_database_id. We also need to get a storage ID, which is going to be import.meta.env.vite_appwrite_storage_id. We also have to have all the collections. So we can say user collection ID is import.meta.env.vite_appwrite_user_collection_id. Post collection ID is going to be import.meta.env.vite_appwrite_post_collection_id. And finally, saves collection ID, which is going to be import.meta.env.vite_appwrite_saves_collection_id. And with that, we have everything we need to start utilizing these services that Appwrite provides out of the box. So back in our code, we can exit our env local, we can exit our config as well. And before we go into our signup form and finalize what this function does on the front end, let's go ahead and implement it on the back end. Or rather, let's utilize all of these services that Appwrite provides. So I'm going to add Appwrite right here to the top, and I'm going to pin it. This is a cool Chrome feature. You can have something pinned. Now with that done, let's go ahead and go into the Appwrite API. And so far, we have only created an account, which then added it right here to our auth. But that's not enough. Our user has to have relations to the post it creates, which means that we need to have it in our database. So right now within our database, we don't yet have a user. So that's going to be our next goal, to add a user to our auth, but also to create the user's document in the database. So how are we going to do it? Well, let me show you. We can go right here below create account, and we can check if we get anything back from it. And if we don't, so if there's no new account, in that case, we want to throw a new error. We can do it just like so, throw error. Then moving down, we can create a new avatar URL by saying const avatar URL is equal to avatars.getInitials. Now, where are we getting these avatars from? Well, that's something we have to import from Appwrite. So you can double click it, press Ctrl space, and then import from /config. If you remember, this is going to be one of these services that Appwrite provides: account, databases, storage, avatars, and client. So now we're using avatars.getInitials, and we want to get the initials from user.name. Once we have the avatar URL, we can create a new user, but this time not a new account, rather a complete new user in the database by saying await save user to DB, just like so. But the main question is, where is this function coming from? And the answer is, it's a function that we are going to define ourselves. So right below this function create new user, we can create a new function, export async function, save user to DB. This function is going to accept the user as a parameter, and we can immediately destructure some of the values from that user, and then open up a new function block. We can destructure the account ID, which is going to be of a type string. We can destructure the email, which is going to be of a type string as well. We can destructure the name of a type string. We can destructure the image URL of a type URL, and we can destructure the username, which is going to be optional, and it's going to be of a type string as well. And how do we know we're getting this? Well, we can pass it right here when we call that function. We can pass an object that's going to have all of these properties. An account ID equal to new account, and then dot $ID. That's how Appwrite stores IDs. We can pass a name equal to new account dot name. We can pass an email equal to new account dot email. We can pass a username equal to new account dot username. Or rather, this username is not going to be within a new account because we're not passing it initially, but we are passing it right here when saving the user in the database. And that's coming from our form. We have a field here called username. So instead, we're going to say user.username. And finally, we need to pass the image URL of a type avatar URL, which we're also passing above. Now we have this new user, which is equal to the function call of our save user to DB. And then instead of returning a new account, we can return a new user, which means that our create user account function is now done. But of course, it's dependent on the save user to DB function. So let's collapse this and let's focus on the save user to DB. Remember, above, we're only using the auth functionalities where we're doing authentication, but now we want to save it. So for the first time in this app, we're going to save a document to Appwrite database. Let's open up a new try and catch block. In the error, we can simply console.log the error. In the try, we can say const new user is equal to await databases dot create document. One more time, where is databases coming from? Try to think about it. It's coming from /config because we're utilizing what we configured not that long ago. And now we have to pass what we want to create. So we're going to pass the Appwrite config .database ID. We need to know which database are we modifying. Then we need to pass the Appwrite config .user collection ID to know which collection are we modifying. We need to pass the ID .unique, and we need to pass the actual user object. Now you're going to notice it's going to start complaining about the Appwrite config, which we have to import from config. That's exactly why we're exporting it in the first place. And then we simply can return this new user. And now, not only are we creating the user in the authentication part, which is right here, but we're also creating it in the database. So let's collapse it. And would you look at that? With two simple functions, we actually have a connection to the database. So what's remaining is to actually try to create our user. So let's go back to our signup form. We're calling the create user account, and let's figure out what we want to happen after the account gets created. We surely don't simply want to console log the newly created user. After the user is created, we want to check if there is no new user, means something went wrong. In that case, we can simply return, meaning exit out of the function. But we also want to play with some additional functionality, which is going to be a small toast that appears, or at least we call it that way. A toast that we can check by going to our ShadCN documentation and then checking the toast functionality. A toast is a little pop-up that you click and then it jumps out. It can be dark like it is here, but you can also have different examples where it can be light, meaning something was good, or a red one, meaning something was really, really bad. So let's go ahead and implement this, which is just going to provide much more intuitive workflow so we immediately know whether the user was created or not. Now I'm going to show you how to add this second ShadCN component to our workflow. We just have to follow the documentation. First, you run the following command: npx ShadCN UI latest add toast. We can do that by opening the second terminal we have here and simply pasting it. Once again, that's npx ShadCN UI add latest add toast. This is now going to add it within our components and then UI. And you can see that the toast and the toaster, as well as the use toast functionality, were added automatically. Don't worry, you don't have to modify these. We just want to use them within our code. So how do we use them? Well, we can refer to the documentation here. We need to add it to the most outer part of our application. In this case, it's not going to be app layout TSX. It's going to be our app. So let's go ahead and copy this import. Let's go right here to our app and let's import it right here at the top. We don't need this entire part. We simply need the import. So we're importing it from toaster UI components. And then we want to put it right here at the end near the closing main toaster, like so. This is going to allow us to see the toaster. And then we have to use the useToast hook whenever we want to call it. So right here, we can import this, go back to the sign up form. We can import it right here at the top. We don't need the form description as we're not using it. And then where do we want to use it? We have to declare it as a hook right here at the top. Const toast is equal to useToast. And then we call it whenever we want it to appear. In this case, right here after the return. So we say toast, scheduled, description, this is it. But of course, we want our toast to say something different. So we can just give it a title, no need for a description. That's going to look something like this. Title is sign up failed. Please try again. As simple as it gets. Now, in this case, let's be optimistic. We're not going to test our application or our function failing. We want to test the toast if everything works. So what do we want to do? We want to sign our user into a session. That's the next step. So we can say const session is equal to await sign in account. Okay? And this is another function that we have to call that will soon implement. For now, let's comment it out. And let me tell you about something more important. In this course, you'll also learn how to use React Query, recently renamed to 10-stack Query as they started supporting Vue, Svelte, Solid, and more. But in our hearts, it's still called React Query. It's going to allow us to do a lot of things right out of the box. It's going to be simple and familiar, but more importantly, it will allow us to cache the data we're fetching from the server. It also has auto refetching, server-side rendering support, pagination out of the box, mutations meaning changes to the server data, infinite scrolling, which we're going to use and implement in this video, and there are so many more reasons to use React Query in your React applications. And in this video, I'll teach you how to use it from scratch. So what do we need to do to get started with React Query and using it alongside Appwrite? Well, we can go right here to our lib, and then next to Appwrite, we can also add a new folder called React-Query. Within here, we can create a new file called queries and mutations.ts. Within here, we're going to import a couple of things we'll use from React Query, but of course, first, we have to install it. So that's going to be at 10stack/react-query. So let's copy this, open up our terminal, and say npm install at 10stack/react-query. Press enter, and soon enough, it will be installed. It's a pretty lightweight library. Once it's installed, we're going to import use query, and queries are for fetching the data. Use mutation, mutations are for modifying the data. Use query client, as well as use infinite query. These are all the things we'll use from React Query. And once again, the reason why we're using it is to simplify data fetching and mutation while getting all the benefits such as caching, infinite scroll, and more out of the box. Now what you want to do here is you want to export our first mutation. So we can say export const use create user account mutation. It's a long name, I know, but we try to make them as meaningful as possible. It's an arrow function that returns a call to use mutation that then gets an object in, and then we want to pass the mutation function. So what are we actually doing? And in this case, it's going to be an arrow function that's going to return a call to our create user account function that we have created not that long ago within /appwrite/API. And it's going to get the user right here as its first and only parameter. And that user is coming right here through the function, which is going to be of a type iNewUser, which we can import from types. So essentially what we've done is we've initialized a new mutation function so that now React Query also knows what we are doing. Now we can use this use create user account mutation within our signup form. And you might have seen this right here. I was testing that, but let's create it from scratch. Right here at the top, we can do it even above the form. We can say const, get something, an object out of it, and call a use create user account mutation, just like so, as a hook. We can immediately import it from add/lib/react query/queries and mutations. There we go. And now, what do we get back? Well, we get back mutate async as well as is loading. The mutate async, if I can spell it properly, is the actual function that we're calling right here. In this case, it is the create user account function that we have created not that long ago that creates the user in the authentication and also saves the user in the database. So now we're calling that as a hook, and it's giving us this mutate async function, but we can rename it so we know what it means. This is going to create a new user account. So we can say create user account. So this syntax simply renames this mutate function into create user account. And we can also rename is loading to is creating user. So it makes more sense. And we no longer need this fake is loading right here. So we can remove it and we can immediately use is creating user right here at the bottom. There we go. That's our new is loading. So React Query provides this out of the box as well. Now, right now it says is loading is not defined or does not exist, but don't worry, we're gonna fix this soon. For now, it's important that we have this create user account, which we can call, and we no longer need to use it directly from Appwrite because this mutation is actually calling create user account from Appwrite for us. It's kind of a level in between the Appwrite and our frontend to ensure that we have easier time fetching data on React and querying and mutating the data as well as caching it. So now we have this and we're calling the create user account as we were before, but now this is a mutation from React Query. Now we can also do a session, which is the sign in account, which is going to be yet another mutation. So let's go to our mutations right here, and we can create another one just by duplicating this one below. We can call it use sign in account mutation. So use sign in account. And now that I think about it, we don't have to add mutation at the end of every single one. So we can simply fix this right here and modify it right here at the top, as well as in the import. So now if we go back, we have the use sign in account. And here, what we want to do is have a mutation function that's going to get the user. But in this case, the user is going to be just the email of a type string, as well as a password of a type string. We can put this in a new line so it makes a bit more sense. And now, of course, we're not going to call the same function once again, which is the create user account. In this case, we're going to call a sign in account, and we want to pass the user. And this sign in account will create in Appwrite. So let's go to Appwrite API. We now have create user account, save user to DB, but right below it, we're going to export async function, sign in account. That's going to get the user, which is going to have a email of a type string, as well as a password of a type string as well. And then it's going to have a try and catch block. Here we can simply console log the error. And in the try, we can create a new email session by saying const session is equal to await account.create session. And again, this is another utility provided to us by Appwrite. It's create email session, to which we have to pass user.email as well as the password by saying user.password. And then we can return this session. So once again, we have created an Appwrite function that's then getting utilized by React Query, and we can import it right here from Appwrite API. So now this one is for creating the user, and this one is for signing into the account. And now we can repeat this with the other hook that we have right here in our sign up form, we can say const, we get a mutate async, which is going to be equal to a function of sign in account, and we get is loading, which is equal to is signing in. And once we get that, we can say that's equal to use sign in account, which we have to import from React query, queries, and mutations. And now we can use this function right here, await sign in account, to which we have to pass the email, which is going to be values.email right here, and then password, which is going to be values.password, and all of this is coming from our form. Once we have that, we can check if session exists by saying if no session, we want to return a new toast saying sign in failed, please try again. And bear with me, I know this is taking some time, but authentication and creating user accounts is one of the most complicated parts of every single application. Now, after we have the session, we have to store that session in our React context. At all times, we need to know that we have a logged in user. So for that reason, we can create a new folder right here within the source, which is going to be called context. Within the context, we can create a new file called auth context.tsx. There, we can run RAFCE, and we'll need to import some utilities for creating context from React, such as create context, use context, use effect, as well as use state. Now we need to define how an empty user is going to look like. So we can say export const initial underscore user is equal to an object where the ID is equal to an empty string, name is equal to an empty string, username is equal to an empty string, email is again an empty string as well, image URL is an empty string, and a bio is also an empty string. So everything is empty. After that, we have to declare the initial auth state. So we can say initial underscore state is equal to an object where the user is equal to the initial user, is loading is set to false, is authenticated is by default set to false, and then we're going to also have the function to set the authenticated user. So set user is equal to a function. Set is authenticated. This is for setting up a Boolean value, which is also going to be a function. And then we're going to have a check auth user, which is going to be an async function that's going to return either a false or a true, which is a Boolean value, just like so. Why we have this? To know whether we have a logged in user at all times. And now we can declare our context by saying const auth context is equal to create context. We can define the type of that context by providing this syntax and then referencing the iContext type, which is coming from @/type. If you look into this, this is simply declaring the types of everything we have now discussed. And finally, we need to set it to the initial state. Now, instead of calling this component auth context, we can call it auth provider, because that's going to wrap our entire app and provide the access to the context. Every context needs to have children because it wraps the entire app and then displays whatever is within it. We can also define the type of children to be equal to a React.node. And I believe it's called React node. So we have to add that here. So now what do we do right here within it? Well, we want to define the state of this user. So that's going to be use state snippet called user, set user as well. And at the start, it's going to be equal to the initial user variable that we have declared before. And we can also give it a context or a type of iUser, which we can import from types. So this is just so our TypeScript knows exactly how our user is going to look like. We're going to also need states for loading. So we can say use state is loading, set is loading. So we can right here declare that. And then at the start, it's going to be false. And we can repeat this as well for another one, use state, which is going to be is authenticated. Set is authenticated. at the start set to false because we don't yet have users that are logged in. What are we going to do then? Well, we're going to wrap everything in our auth context. That's going to look like this: auth context dot provider, and we need to pass it the value. So the value will be equal to value, and we can declare what we're passing right here on the top by saying const value is equal to an object that's going to have the user, the set user function, which we will declare soon. It's also going to have the is loading. It's going to have the is authenticated. It will have the set is authenticated as well. And it's going to have a function called check auth user, which we can define right here. Const check auth user is equal to a function right here. And now we're passing that value to our provider. Also, we need to render the children within it right here. Now, of course, the value is going to complain because there's going to be a mismatch between the types, but we'll solve that really soon once we utilize the check auth user function. So what is this function going to do? Well, it's going to be an async function that's going to have a try and catch block. In the catch, we can simply say console.log error, and we can return a false, meaning user is not authenticated. We can also have a finally clause, which is going to set is loading to false, meaning we're done with loading. But in the try, we'll actually try to get to the currently logged in user account. So we can say const current account is equal to await get current user. And this is a function we'll create directly within Appwrite. So let's go to Appwrite API, that's going to be right here, and let's go below the sign in account. Export async function get current user, and we can open up a try and catch block as we always do. In the catch, simply console.log the error, and here we can say const current account is equal to await account.get, and then we can check if that current account doesn't exist. We can simply throw a new error, but if it does exist, we can try to retrieve that current account by saying const current user is equal to await databases dot list documents. So here we need to pass the database ID from which we want to read, the collection ID from which we want to read, and then the query of what we're trying to fetch. So we need to get a list of all user documents in a given collection. First, we need to pass the Appwrite config dot database ID. Then we need to pass the Appwrite config dot user collection ID. And then we need to pass what we're trying to fetch, which is a query of a type array. So we can say query dot equal, we want to get the account ID, and we want to get only the current account dot $ID. And this query is coming from Appwrite, so we can import it at the top. Finally, we can do another check saying if there is no current account or current user this time, we're going to throw an error. But if we have it, we can return a current user dot documents 0. There we go. So now we have the get current user function, which we can now use within our auth context by simply importing it from lib Appwrite API. So here, now we check if the current account exists. In that case, we want to set our user. So we can say set user, and then we set the ID to be equal to the current account dot $ID, the name to be current account dot name, username to be equal to current account dot username, email to be equal to current account dot email, image URL to be equal to current account dot, that's going to be image URL, and then bio to be equal to current account dot bio. Of course, what you could have done is you could have destructured all of these values from the current account right here by using the destructuring assignment and then pasting them here. You also need to add commas to the end. And if you did that, You can also put it all in one line as it's not taking too much space. And now you don't have to mention current account every single time. So it's going to look a bit cleaner like this. And for other properties, you don't even have to say what it is if the name is the same, which in all of these cases is. So you can simply keep the key name. Here, since we no longer have access to the entire current account, we can just refer to the ID. And then all of this also fits in one line, so we can put it in one line like so. This is, in my opinion, a bit easier to understand what we're doing. But we have to be careful, and TypeScript comes in really handy here. If I wasn't using TypeScript, I would do it exactly like this. I would destructure everything and get the values. But if you read this in TypeScript, it's going to say property $ID, as well as all the other ones, do not exist on type document or undefined. So if you look into the getCurrentUser, you can notice that here it's great. It's returning all of these values, but in the catch, it's not returning anything. So if this function fails, then these values will be undefined and they'll cause an error. So in this case, to make our application less error prone, I would actually get back a bit and I wouldn't destructure the value. Although it's taking a bit more space and maybe includes a bit more words, I would still keep it like this. Sometimes more words is not bad if your application is more robust. Finally, if we get to here, once we set our user, we can also set the authenticated status to true and return true as well. If we're outside of this block, we're going to return false. And this is our checkAuth user function. Now, this has to be called whenever we reload our page. And for that, we have to use the use effect. So we can define a new use effect hook that's going to have a function like so, and a dependency array like this, empty, meaning it's only going to be called whenever the app reloads. Here, we can look into our local storage. So we can say if local storage dot get item, Appwrite called it cookie fallback, is triple equal to a string of an empty array, or it's a local storage dot get item cookie fallback is equal to null. In that case, we simply want to navigate the user back to the sign in screen. So in that case, we can import a new hook at the top, import use navigate, which is coming from React Router DOM, and we need to initialize it right here at the top by saying const navigate is equal to use navigate, and now we can call it navigate to /sign in. And I noticed that I didn't close the local storage.getItem, so here I'm going to close it, and this is how it's supposed to look like. Finally, whenever we reload the page, we want to recall the checkAuth user function that we have created above. So now we have our use effect, we have our checkAuth user, we're passing all of these as values, and we're wrapping our entire application with all of these values so that at any point in time, we completely understand whether our user is logged in or not. Finally, we can also export right here at the bottom, export const use user context. This is going to make it simple for us to call this context every time, which is a function call to use context, and then we pass in the auth context. Great. So now we have this phenomenal context, and I noticed that here it says auth provider, which is not really used. We have to export it right here, export default auth provider, not auth context. And I want to point your attention to something. This is a complex app. The files are also complex. There's a lot of logic happening here. And although I try to explain everything to the best of my ability, it's possible that either I or maybe you miss something. It's easy to make a typo, right? So test your application thoroughly. We're going to test it together after we're done with this authentication. And if something doesn't work, the complete GitHub repository is going to be down in the description. So simply refer to all the finished files and simply override the things you have so far to ensure that everything is good. And if you're still having some errors, our Discord community link is going to be down, and we have a forum specifically for this video for everybody to assist you with the problems you're having. So with that said, let's now utilize this auth context within our sign up form. Right here, we can say const is logged in is equal to await check auth user, which we can import from our context. So right here, we can say const check auth user, as well as is loading, which we can rename to is user loading, is equal to use user context, like so. And we can import it from use user context, context auth context. There we go. So now we're calling it and we're getting the Boolean value back is logged in. Finally, what we want to do is if is logged in that case, we want to call the form.reset. So we want to reset the form and we want to call that same navigate, remember, from React router. So that's going to be link, but also use navigate. And we define it right here, const navigate is equal to use navigate. And now we want to navigate to the home page because we are successfully logged in. So we can say navigate to /. Else, if we're not successfully logged in, we can again show a toast saying sign up failed, please try again, and we can immediately return it. And this is our onSubmit function. A lot of things were happening in the meantime. We worked out our database, we worked out our React query, Appwrite, we did everything. Also, we created content in the meantime. So a lot of stuff has happened. Let's go ahead and test it out. So we can go back to our application. I'm sure something's going to be broken. So let's go to inspect, console, and let's reload the page. As you can see, it's saying that we have an error in the sign up form saying that there's no query client set. Use query client provider to set one. The reason why we're getting this error is because we didn't actually utilize our auth nor our React query in our app. We simply wrote some code in some files, but to actually utilize it, we have to go way back to our source main.tsx, and we have to wrap our app with all of these providers. So first, let's wrap it with the auth provider, which is coming from /context auth context, and then we can put our app right here within it and indent it properly. This is the context we have created. But with React query, we also have to create our own context. So let's go into lib React query and create a query provider.tsx. Here we have to do something similar we've done with our own context by running rafce. Instead of a default export, we can simply use a named one, export const query provider. We also get the children right here because we need to show the entire app within it, which is going to be of a type children react.react node, like so. We can also just import React node at the top. That's going to be a bit simpler. So we can destructure React node from React. And now it's going to fit in one line. And then we need to return query client provider like this that we can import from tanstack React query. It's going to have a client property equal to query client, which is once again coming from tanstack React query. So we can import it at the top. And I believe it should start with a lowercase letter. So it's a query client like so. And it's complaining right here. That's because we have to set up a new instance of that query client by saying const query client with a lowercase q is equal to new query client that we call like this. And then we pass the lowercase one right here. And finally, we can render the children right here. This is similar to our own context we have created before. So now going back to our main, alongside wrapping it in the auth provider, we can also wrap it in the query provider, which is coming from lib React query provider. And we can put all of this within it and indent it properly. So now we're properly wrapping our app with everything we need, and we can again check the errors. Now the error is saying that is creating user is not defined at sign up form. So let's go to our sign up form and let's search for is creating user. That is creating user is coming right here from our use create user account. So why would this is loading not be there? It's actually saying that it's not returning the is loading property. Well, this is coming from use create user account, and that is a mutation from React query. So let's go ahead and check out our package.json. And would you look at that? TanStack just recently changed its version to version 5.0.0. And when developing these projects for JSM, they take a couple of weeks up to a couple of months to create. So it's possible that our development version is using an older version of React query. This is actually quite exciting for you right now because we're going to do some live debugging. We're going to go over the documentation of the new version, and I'm going to show you how you would deal with this error if you're following a video and something got outdated. So the first thing you have to do is go to the library we're using and then go to the docs. In this case, we're wondering about the loading. So if I search for is loading, no, nothing is here. But if I search for just loading itself, we can see displaying global background fetching loading state. Maybe that's useful. Now we can see that this is for global fetching, right? But we want to see maybe use is fetching. No, let's see if I can find anything useful now. No, this is not that useful. Let's see a quick start. Here we can use the use mutation. They are creating everything we discussed in this video, creating a new query client, using that query client and using one mutation, exactly as we are. But in this case, I don't see they're using the loading. So let's go a bit more in depth into the overview. And there we go. Here they use a query, and it indeed is using the is loading property, but this is a query and not a mutation. We have to differentiate the query from a mutation. So maybe we want to read a bit more about the mutation. So let's go into mutations and let's see how that works. So we can use a mutation, and apparently there is a mutation that is loading. Also the is error and is success. So let's compare the two. Const mutation is equal to use mutation, and they use it directly right here within the code. Oh, this is interesting. So unlike queries, mutations are typically used to create, update, delete data, or perform side effects. For this purpose, TanStack query exports a use mutation hook. But I just figured out I'm reading the v4 docs. We want to redirect to the latest version. Oh, there we go. Can you see the difference? Mutation.is pending and not is loading. Okay, I get it. Maybe they wanted to make a change from the query. So in the query right here, once we try to call it, yeah, they're also calling it is pending. So kind of waiting for something, not loading, but pending, right? Okay, I'm gonna give it to them. But now if we go back to our application and go back here and simply use is pending instead of is loading, you can see it actually works. This is amazing. So now if I save the file and reload the page, everything seems good, but it's saying is creating user is not defined. I think we called it is creating account. So let's simply copy is creating account, move all the way down, and then modify it. And now we're back to our sign in form, which means we were redirected. Let's try to close and reload. Okay, no errors, that's good. But let's go back to the sign up form. That's what we were working on this entire time. Okay, this is interesting. So every time we go back to sign up, it redirects us back to sign in. I'm guessing that's because it thinks we have already created a user. So what we can do is just go back here, go to the application tab, and check our local storage. It seems to be empty, as well as the session storage. So the question is, why are we getting redirected? The only place where this could occur is the place that happens as soon as we load the page. Do you know such place? I think that's going to be our auth context. Here we have a use effect, and here we navigate to sign in. So right in here, for now, we're going to comment out this second line and we can put it right here above and save it and remove this or sign. If we do this, and now if we go to sign up, you can see it's no longer going to redirect us. Everything is working. And there we go. We can finally see our sign up screen we've been working on for such a long time. But if you think about it, we weren't working on just the sign up screen. We were working on everything else we'll need for the entirety of our application. So now if we go back to our sign up form, we know what needs to happen. After we successfully create an account, we're going to create a session, add that to the user context, and then navigate to the homepage. So let's see if that works. Let's try with something like the real JSM. We can also do that right here, the real JSM. The email can be something like, let's do adrian@jsmastery.pro, and we can choose a specific password and click sign up. It says loading, and it disappeared. Or no, it didn't. It actually redirected us to the homepage, which right now is completely empty and has the root layout. After all this hard work, we should have implemented that confetti screen to also pop up, as this was stuff what we've gotten here. If something didn't work for you, definitely make sure to refer to the codebase. What's also possible is that while you were trying to log in, maybe you used the same email before, so your user already got created. If that's the case, try a couple of different emails and usernames and ensure that isn't the case. But now that we have successfully created our user, you can see that we have it right here under a user collection. No longer is it just under auth, but also under databases, users, and we have the real JSM with the username, account ID, email, and everything else. So this is great. This means that we have just added a document in our database, and also that we have logged in our user. So now if we go back and reload the page, you can notice that we stay here because it knows that the user is already logged in. But of course, to completely finalize our auth, we need to implement the login screen as well. So what we can do is right click, go to inspect, go to the application tab right here, and then under local storage, you'll be able to see a cookie fallback. This was added by Appwrite. What you need to do is just clear it. This is going to clear our existing session. And then we can go back right here to auth context, and we can check if local storage.getItem cookie fallback is null. In that case, we want to redirect back to the sign in screen. So now if we save this, you can see we're redirected to the sign in form. So now let's try to implement the sign in. Trust me, to do it, it won't be as difficult as implementing the sign up. What we can do is copy literally the entire sign up form exactly as it is, and then go to sign in form and paste it right here. First of all, rename it from sign up form right here at the bottom to sign in form. Also rename it right here at the top. And now there are a couple of modifications we'll have to make. Let's start from the top to the bottom. We'll be using the use user context, that's okay. And we'll use the use sign in. In this case, we don't need the use create account. The form is only going to accept the email and the password, not the name and the username as well. And we have to change this to sign in validation. So let's go to our ZOD, which is right here under validation index.ts. And we can duplicate this right below, rename it to sign in validation, and only contain the email and the password. We can remove the name and the username. Then you can go back and double click this and press F2. This is going to open up a rename window, or you can just simply press sign in and press enter. It's going to automatically change all of the naming. If this didn't work for you, simply exchange every time that it says sign up to say sign in. After that, we have our submit handler. We also get the values, but we can skip the user creation process and only focus on the session. Still, the check-in is going to be the same, and everything else is going to be exactly the same, but we'll have to modify our form. Instead of create a new account, we can say log in to your account. We can say something more personal, something like welcome back. Please enter your details. Then we don't have the first two fields, so we can completely remove them. The only thing we do have is going to be the email and the password. So now if you save this, you can see it's no longer going to be is creating account. This time it's going to be is user loading. And is that it? We won't need this rename right here, and we won't need use create account. If we save this, our form is back. And we also need to change the last thing that it says right here, as well as the button. It's going to say sign in. And then here we can say don't have an account. In that case, you can sign up. And then this is going to redirect to sign up. You see how simple that was. And there we go. Now if you click it, you go to sign up, you go to login. This is looking great. And now let's try to log in with the account we have created. I'll use the same email and password and click sign in. This time it doesn't seem to go through. Let's see why that might be the case. I'm going to go to inspect, and then I'm going to go to console and reload the page. I'll try to enter my same email and password one more time and click sign in. It almost seems like nothing is happening. So our submit button is actually submitting the form. We don't need this is pending right here. And then we call the onSubmit handler, which should sign us right in. And then if we are logged in, it should navigate to /. But in this case, for some reason, it doesn't do it. I'll try to reload. Even if I reload, we're still here on square one. But that's okay. Let's figure it out together. Let's see if we actually get right here. So let's try to console.log is logged in. And then we can say console.log navigating. I'm guessing we're not getting to right here. So I'm going to save it. And I'll enter my details one more time. And press sign in. It's almost as if nothing happens. We're also not getting any toasts, so that's a bit suspicious. Let's add some more console logs a bit higher right here. Let's console log the session. And let's also console log right here at the top by saying we're in. That's the whole point of coding, right? Getting stuck and getting past these errors. Once again, let's try it together. And once again, absolutely nothing happens. Here nor here. Now, it seems like this onSubmit function is not actually getting called, even though we have it right here under form submit, and the button should indeed submit that form as it has the type of submit. So one thing I'll try to do is just restart our application. So go to our terminal, press Ctrl C and then Y, and then simply run npm run dev one more time. It's a wild guess, but sometimes, who knows, it might make things work. I'm going to make this a bit larger so we can see it a bit better. Let's make it so large so we can see this nice image as well. I'm going to enter my email and the password and click sign in. And once again, no console logs, no errors, nothing is even in the network tab right here. So if you clean it and click, nothing is here. It seems like this form is not getting fired. And I really like it when this happens. It exposes me to you and it makes me think. It makes me want to resolve this together with you watching this video. So let's try to figure it out together. Let's go all the way to the top of the file and let's see if everything is looking good. We have some imports from hook form, React router DOM. Then we can divide our internal imports coming from components right here. We also have some more React hook form. Or rather, this was React router DOM, this is React hook form. And then we have something from lib validation. This is the sign up validation. Oh no, wait, this was supposed to be sign in. Looks like it auto imported it in the wrong way. This right here was supposed to be only sign in. Yes, because now we're talking about sign in right here and not sign up. Actually, this allowed us from submitting the form. Well, I guess that's its job, right? So I'm going to delete all of the console logs right now and save the file. There we go. And hope that it was just the wrong import right here. So now I'm going to expand the entire app. We can see how wonderful this sign in is. Sign up as well. It's instantaneous moving between the two. And we can try to log in with the account we have previously created. I'm going to enter my password and click sign in. And we are on our homepage. This is phenomenal. I know it took some time to do this entire auth and everything else, but hey, we're finally in. And now we can start focusing on our homepage. So we can close our sign in and the sign up, and we can go right here to source, root, pages, and then homepage. Or rather, we'll have to do the root layout first because that's what we're seeing, but then soon enough, we'll move to the homepage and the rest of the content. I know it took some time, but we laid out a strong foundation for everything else we're about to build. So phenomenal job coming this far into the video, and now the exciting stuff begins. Let's get started with the root layout. The layout is going to play a major role in turning our app from this to this, where we have the sidebar on the left side, the whole middle part for the post, and then the top creators on the right. And of course, it's all fully mobile responsive. So as you scroll, we have this beautiful mobile UI. So let's get started with the root layout by wrapping everything in a div that's going to have a class name equal to w-full for full width, and on medium devices, flex. Now within here, we'll have a couple of components. So let's go ahead and create them. We can do them within the shared, and we can create a new file called topbar.tsx and run refce inside of there. We can do a second one called left sidebar.tsx and run refce. If we have a left one, we're going to also have a bottom bar. So let's create a bottom bar.tsx, run refce, and that's everything we need so far. So let's go back into our root layout and let's use all of these components. So here we can put the top bar at the top and just self-close it and import it by double-clicking and pressing Control Space. Then we're going to have the left sidebar immediately below. Also, you need to import it. Then below it, we're going to have a section. And this section is going to have a class name equal to flex, flex-1, so it expands, and then h-full for the full height. And within it, we want to render the outlet component. This component has to be imported from React Router DOM. So outlet from React Router DOM. This is similar to what we have done before for our auth layout, where this outlet actually lets us show what's going to be on the homepage later on. And then below it, we also want to render the bottom bar. There we go. So now we have everything we need right here. If you scroll all the way, you'll see a bottom bar there as well. So now, before we start with the homepage, let's start with these individual pages, such as the top bar, since it's at the top. This is going to be a simple section. So let's turn it into a section. And it's going to have a class name equal to top bar. Within it, we can create a div, and that div is going to have a class name equal to flex between, padding y of 4, meaning top and bottom, and padding x, meaning left and right, of 5. Right here, we can render a link, and that link is going to point to the homepage. It's also going to have a class name equal to flex, gap-3, and items-center because it needs to center our image. So first, let's import this link from React Router DOM by saying import link from React Router DOM. And then this image is going to have a source equal to /assets /images /logo.svg. Once we save it, you can see Snapgram appear on top. Let's also give it an alt tag of logo, a width of 130 pixels, and a height of 325 pixels. There we go. Now below the link, still within this div, we want to do another div that's going to have a class name equal to flex and a gap of 4. Within it, we can create a button. And this is going to be a reusable button component, of course, coming from shadcn, meaning from UI button. Within the button, we can render the image that has a source equal to /assets /icons /logout.svg, and the alt tag can be logout as well. There we go. You can see it on there. And then we also need to have a variant equal to ghost. That's an interesting one. We can give it a class name equal to shad button underscore ghost. And we can give it an onClick property. So that's going to be right here on click. And we simply want to call the sign out functionality. Now this sign out is something we also have to define. So we'll have to go to our queries. That's going to be within lib, React query, and then queries and mutations. And right here, we'll have to copy the use sign in account, duplicate it right below, and call it use sign out account. And we simply want to use a mutation or return a mutation that doesn't have to get any properties in, but it has to call the sign out account function. So we can do it just like so. But of course, this has to come from Appwrite. So in the Appwrite, we'll have to create a new function like we have sign in account. We'll also have to have another export async function, sign out account. We can open up a new try and catch block, console log the error right here. And then on try, we can say const session is equal to await account.delete session. And then we need to pass current. This is so cool. So this was provided to us by Appwrite, so we can delete the session and then we can return the deleted session. Now we have this sign out account. Within queries and mutations, we can import it from Appwrite, and we don't have to call it because it's going to be self-calling function, or rather just a function declaration here. And then going back to the top bar, we can define that mutation. We can do that by going here to the top and saying const mutate. In this case, it's going to sign out. We're going to get the isSuccess variable as well, and that's going to be equal to use sign out account coming from lib React query, queries and mutations. And now we can call the sign out on click. And we can also make it an actual function like so and call it here. There we go. So now we can see the logout button as well. Here, we also want to add a use effect. So we can say use effect. And if we have successfully navigated, so if is success, then we want to use the navigate. So right here, we can import const. So at the top, we can import use navigate from React Router DOM. We can declare it as a function, const navigate is equal to use navigate. And then if is success, we can say navigate 0. This is going to navigate us to the sign up or the sign in screen. And we also need to add the dependency array, or we can check for is success and then import use effect from React. So at the top, we can import use effect coming from React. There we go. Finally, we can also add a profile photo that we can click to go to our profile. So right below the button, we can add a link that's going to have a to, and then we want to go to /profile. But now how do we get the ID of the currently logged in user? Well, thankfully, we have created our context. So right here at the top, we can say const user is equal to use user context, which we have to import from @/context /auth context. And then right here, we can use $ in curly braces and then say user.id. We can also give this link a class name equal to flex center gap 3. And right within the link, we can render an image that's going to have a source equal to either user.imageURL, or we can use some kind of a placeholder just to be safe. So that's /assets/images /profile-placeholder.svg. If we save it, we can see our huge TR. Soon enough, we'll figure out why TR. I don't think I've called myself something with TR. Oh, I have. It's the real JSM, so that's why it has those initials. Alt is going to be profile, and then class name is going to be h-8 for height, w-8, and then Tailwind allows us to make it rounded really easily by saying rounded-full. And now we have our top bar. You might have been wondering, where is this top bar, right? On the desktop, we don't have it, but we're immediately building this application so it works well. Not well, so it works phenomenally on mobile devices. So that's why here on mobile, this phenomenal top bar appears. That's great. And now we also have the logout functionality. So if we click it, actually redirects back, and we can immediately jump back in. Everything is working flawlessly so far. The top bar is done. Let's focus on the left sidebar next. Here is where we're going to have all of the links that we have right here. To get started with the left sidebar, we'll have to keep our window expanded so we can see it on the desktop mode, which we can see right here. I guess it's tablet as well. And then we can move our code just a bit to the left. There we go. So let's start with creating a nav because, yeah, even though it's a sidebar, it is a navigation bar. We can give it a class name equal to left sidebar. We can save it and go back. And now here you can see immediately that this shifted the homepage a bit to the right. Within the nav, let's create a div that's going to have a class name equal to flex-call, as the elements are going to appear one on top of another, and then a gap of 11 to create some space. Right within that div, we're going to have our first link. And this is going to be the same link as on mobile. So we can go back to our top bar and we can copy this entire link right here and paste it in the left sidebar. We of course need to import link at the top from React Router DOM. So we can say link, and that's coming from React Router DOM. If we save it, it's looking good, but we can modify the width to 170 and the height to 36. There we go. That looks a bit better for the sidebar. Right below it, we can show our link to the profile page. So let's go below the link and then create another link. This link is going to point to / and it's going to be as before, a dynamic link to / profile, not this, what I just typed, but profile and then / the user ID, right? And we already know where the user ID is coming from. It's going to be similar as with the top bar. So here we can immediately copy what we have, because in the sidebar, we'll also have to deal with the logout functionality. So we might as well copy most of the things we have here on the top, as well as what we have defined in the component. So let's copy everything from here and paste it in the left sidebar on top, just replacing the name of the component to left sidebar. There we go. Now if we save this, everything still works. We have the user ID. We can give it a class name equal to flex gap-3 and items-center. Right within it, we can show an image that's going to have a source equal to user.imageURL or /assets/icons /profile-placeholder.svg. There we go. We have our the real JSM. Let's give it an alt tag of profile, as well as a class name equal to h-14, width of 14 as well, and rounded dash full. Now next to this, we also want to show the name of the person that's logged in because we have a bit more space than on mobile. So let's create a div that's going to have a class name equal to flex dash call, so it appears one below another. And here we can do a p tag that's going to have a class name equal to body dash bold. Here we can render user dot name, and that's going to show the real JSM. And right below, we can render another p tag that's going to have a class name equal to small dash regular text dash light dash 3. And it's going to say at and then dynamically user dot username. If we save it, now we can see this is going to work, but we can remove the $sign. There we go. How cool it is that we can immediately extract all of this user information directly from the user context. That's what we've been working on so hard while creating the authentication. So now we can simply use it. Now going below, we want to render the sidebar links. So let's move below this link and let's create a new UL, an unordered list, that's going to have a class name equal to flex dash call, and a gap of 6. Right here, we might as well render all the nav links one by one by saying link, 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 and then duplicate this many, many times. Of course, each link has to have a path, it has to have some content, so it's going to expand on many, many lines right here. Instead of that, what we try to do as good developers, being more structured, is we can create something known as constants file. That's a special file and folder right here above our context, still within the source. So create a new folder called constants, and then create a new index.ts right within it. Here, you can define some sidebar links. Just like so, it's going to be an array, and then we can say home, anything else you want to say, you can add here. Since this is not any logic, but rather just static code, what we can do is in the description down below, in the GitHub gist, you can find the complete constants index.ts file. So copy it and paste it here. You can notice that this is mostly bottom bar links as well as sidebar links. So what this allows us to do is just jump right into here and open up a dynamic block of code and say sidebar links dot map, where we get each individual link, which is of a type I nav link, interface nav link, which we can import from @/types. And then you can open up a new function block. Also import sidebar links from @/constants. Here we can simply return something known as a nav link. And a nav link is a component coming from React Router DOM. So right here on top, we can import link as well as a nav link. There we go. So now going here, each nav link has to have a to property. So where are we going to? In this case, we're going to link that route because each sidebar link has a route, an image URL, and a label. So now we can also give it a class name equal to left sidebar dash link. And as a matter of fact, I think we need to wrap this nav link with an li, because an li is a list item that has to go between the ULs. So you can put the nav link between the li, and then the class name of left sidebar link is actually going to go to the li. Since we're mapping over it, we also have to give it a key equal to link.label. Now, our nav link is going to say something, right? And that something is link.label. So if we save it, now you can see all of these different labels. Let's style it a bit further by giving it a class name equal to flex, gap of 4, items-center, and padding of 4. There we go. This gives us much more space. We can also render an image right here next to the label by saying img. We can give it a source equal to link.imageURL. Alt is equal to link.label. And we can give it a class name equal to group-hover invert dash white. So this is just to make the color work. And there we go. So now if you hover over it, you cannot see it. We're about to fix that, but this is looking good. But on the final version of our application, you can see that we have a currently active link. So we can do that here as well. But how do we figure out on which link are we on? Well, we have to use something known as a use location. So right here from React Router DOM, we can also import use location, which is a hook, and then we can declare it right here at the top by saying const path name is equal to use location. And now we can use that path name right here in the sidebar links to create a Boolean variable called isActive. So const isActive is equal to, and it's active if the path name is equal to link.route. Based off of this isActive Boolean, we can also change some styles. So in this li, we can make it dynamic by turning it into a template string like so. And then we can say if isActive, then also render the bg primary 500. So if we save it, you can see the color changes. Now the last thing is also to change the color of the icon. So let's change the image to be also a dynamic template string. And if it is active, then we can call the invert white. So if I now save it, we have to properly spell it for this to work. It seems like we have one extra brace. So if I fix it, there we go. But if we hover, it's not yet fixed. So let's see what that is about. Let's try to properly space it out so we can better see it. Group hover, invert white, and then we have if is active, then also invert white. If we go here, you can see that it works really nicely. It inverts, but in this one, it doesn't. That's interesting. That's because we have to make this a group. So this li actually has to have a group property. So it knows it's grouped with this. So if we hover over this, it actually applies a group hover. There we go. So now this is such a wonderful sidebar. The last thing we're missing is the logout functionality. So let's add that right here below this UL, and then going one more time below the div. Here, we want to add a button, and this button is going to be almost exactly the same as in the top bar. So we can just copy this entire sign out button and then paste it here. If you do that, you can notice the icon appear, but here we have a bit more space. So we can also add the text that says logout. And let's also space this correctly. So we have a variant class name on click, and then we have an image. And then finally, below the image, we can have a p tag that's going to say logout, and we can give it a class name equal to small medium and LG base medium. So if we save it, you can see logout, and that concludes our sidebar. Of course, now if you try clicking explore, nothing's going to happen because that route doesn't yet exist. So while we're here, what do you say that we implement the routing so that everything we worked so hard on doesn't just disappear? So to do that, we can now go back to our main, or rather to our app right here, because that's where we have the routing, and we can implement all the other private routes. And trust me, we're going to have quite a few. So let's create a new route, which is going to be a self-closing component with a path of /explore. And it's going to render an element that's going to be called, I think you can guess it, explore. There we go. So now we want to duplicate this many times below. The second one is going to be saved, meaning all the saved posts right here, but we cannot now see it because we broke it. And that's going to render saved. Then we have to have all users, which is going to go to all users. Let's expand this just a bit. Then we can have create post, and that's going to be create post. We can also have update dash post, and we need to know the ID of the post we're updating. Take care of these columns right here. That's going to be edit post. Then we're going to have a specific post details. So that's going to be posts and then the ID of that post. So that's going to be post details. And then we have a profile. So that's /profile/ID. And we can also add this special asterisk, which means that everything after the profile is also going to point to that profile. We can say profile. And finally, we're going to have the update-profile/ID, where we're going to render the update profile. And with that said, we now have all of our routes. The last thing we have to do is create those pages within the pages folder right here. So let's create them one by one. That's going to be starting from the top, all users.tsx, where we can run RAFCE. Let's go to the next one. That's going to be create post.tsx, and again, run RAFCE. After create post, we're going to have edit post.tsx, where we're going to create RAFCE. After that, we're going to have